besties, it's your girl Harpo. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brown Girl Guilt. Before we begin this episode, I do have to give you all a trigger warning. I am going to be talking about sexual violence. So, if this is a subject that is a little bit hard for you or might cause a little bit of anxiety or stress or grief or sadness, you can either pause it here and then come back to this episode at a later time when you're feeling a little bit more courageous, or you can listen through, and at any point during the episode, if you're feeling like this is too much, you can always turn it off. You can always come back to it, or you can also choose not to come back to it. And if it does bring up anything that's really difficult, perhaps you haven't had a chance to go through, you haven't had a chance to process, or it's just plain and simple too hard, I would encourage you to talk to someone that you really love and trust, and someone who really loves you and can hold really nice, divine space for you. It might also be an opportunity for you to connect with a healthcare professional, a mental health care professional, like a counselor or a therapist. Some of this stuff can be really heavy, and it can really impact us mentally, emotionally, and physically. So I don't want to take that lightly. So I'm just going to say that to you now as a caveat at the beginning of this episode. I've done a lot of work to be able to come to this place to actually be standing here in my closet recording this podcast episode. But I will also say that I'm sweating as I'm recording this episode because releasing an episode like this is a lot. It takes a lot of vulnerability. It takes a lot of courage, but I'm doing it anyway. And it's because I'm called to. It's because I'm feeling really called to. Now, when I record my podcast episodes for Brown Girl Guild, I don't really write out my episodes typically. I don't read from a script. I usually just free flow and speak from my heart. And there's very minimal editing that goes into the actual episode itself. So that's usually the case. But for this particular episode, I have to be transparent and say that I am going to be reading something that I wrote. And that's for two reasons. Number one is because originally I thought that whatever I'm going to share would be a Substack post on my Substack newsletter. It's titled Harpo's Wildlife. You can find it on Substack. You can what's the word that I'm looking for? You can subscribe to it. So that's number one. I thought it was going to be written. But number two, the reason I'm reading it also is because I have so eloquently written out what I want to share. And I just find that if I was to be put on the spot and have to share what I want to share from the heart, it's a lot, right? Like, again, my breathing has gotten shallower and heavier. I'm sweating. I'm uncomfortable. I can't really think straight, but I know I want to share this. So I think reading something is going to be a lot better. It's going to be a bit more effective. So here goes. I'm afraid of men. So we're going to get right into it. I was 14 years old when he pinned me to the wall and he tried to put his lips on mine. I still remember it like it was yesterday. I remember all of it, the words that he said, the pitch and the tone of his voice, the way my body felt and where his hands went. I remember the scene perfectly, not a bit here nor there. I remember everything that I did and how quickly and fiercely I pushed back. I remember running out of the room as quick as I could. What I don't remember is anything after leaving the room. I know that I walked down the stairs of his house and into my mom's car in silence. I knew I wasn't supposed to say anything or tell anyone, and that I had to keep the whole thing a secret. What I don't remember is what happened after I got home. The scariest part? What I don't remember is what happened for the next decade. For an entire decade after, my mind would block out the entire incident altogether. It was way too painful, too terrifying, too traumatizing for my body to even think about it, let alone feel it. My mind swooped in, held the memory hostage, and forced me to carry on with my life as it had never happened. The next decade would see me experience multiple incidents of sexual violence in varying degrees. Boys would touch me as I passed by in bars. Men would put their hands under my dresses when I wasn't looking, swipe up swiftly, and be gone before I could even turn around. Uncles would place their hands too low during hugs and greetings. The doormen and managers who worked in buildings I lived in would knock on my door at odd hours of the day and night and make me uncomfortable and make really, really uncomfortable insinuations. The list is endless, and yet for an entire decade, I was registering none of it. My brain was numb, caught up entirely in trying to block out the original incident. A few years ago, I was at a women's conference in Muskoka, Ontario. It was the height of the hashtag #MeToo movement, and conversations about women's experiences with sexual violence were everywhere. For the first time in what felt like ever, conversations about sexual violence were being normalized. One of the days, we spent hours as women recounting all the experiences that compromised our bodily safety. I remember going back into my room with my roommate and having a full breakdown. The incident that I'd buried so deep in my psyche and body was flooding out. She was the first person I ever told, and it had been years since that incident. I would continue to talk about it with my therapist, my voice trembling and shaking the first dozen times. Eventually, I would start to tell some more friends and practitioners, and it began to get easier. After having spoken about it close to 100 times, I thought I might finally have healed from it. The idea that I might have finally healed from the incident came up for me many times. I thought maybe I'd have healed from it when I finally told my dad. I thought I might have healed from it when I finally told my mom. I thought I might have healed from it when I finally talked to him, the one who pinned me against the wall. I didn't, and I hadn't. I said to my therapist in a therapy session recently that I couldn't help but notice how afraid of men I regularly am. I explained to her that no matter what my relationship with a man is, I never fully feel safe around him. I'm always on edge, uncomfortable, and a little bit awkward. Now that I had the awareness of it, I wanted desperately to understand why and rectify it. She responded by asking me if there had ever been an incident with a man in my childhood or adolescence where I'd felt unsafe, and I literally cackled. Of course there had. I told her about the incident. I also told her that I'd healed from it, and it couldn't be that. But it was that, obviously. Of course it was. I hadn't healed from it, and the incident was still sending shockwaves into my life. While I might have normalized the experience and talked about it close to 100 times, I'd never fully felt the pain and discomfort it caused me in my body. I never allowed myself to go back to that 14-year-old Harpo who had her safety compromised. I hadn't gone beyond the intellectualizing of it. My therapist then had me make a timeline of all the times I'd been made to feel unsafe by men from the earliest memory until now. As I began to write out the timeline, I was shocked. I'd never experienced resistance like that to a task ever before. Every time I sat down to write it all out, I got a piercing headache, brain fog. I would numb out. I kept losing my breath. I would feel my chest tighten and I would start to cry. I couldn't do it. And this would go on for at least 2 weeks. Something I learned during this exercise is that I couldn't quite place everything in sequential order. It was all a little blur. And many times I'd leave off the timeline only to remember an experience while showering or in a conversation. I'd go back into my journal and then capture it. I learned also that my fear of men does indeed stem from that original incident because a man who isn't supposed to make me feel unsafe, a man who is family, a man who should protect me and love me and care for me, compromised my safety, the integrity of our relationship, and the autonomy and boundaries of my body. A man who shouldn't do what he did what he did. I spent every moment after that incident anticipating that other men would do the same. So for years after the incident, I couldn't trust men. I used to even feel uncomfortable being home alone with my own dad and my own brother, constantly in anticipation that another man that I trusted would compromise my safety again. I wouldn't participate in activities led by men because I was scared of them. I wouldn't date men. I wouldn't be present around men. And I wouldn't have genuine friendships with men. I was literally terrified of men. Even the men I did have relationships with lacked presence. I was always in my head and on guard. I was never fully myself and always kept a bit off guard. I didn't realize how deeply the original incident had impacted the way I viewed and related to men. So, I've decided to heal my relationship with men at a very deep level because I genuinely want to love men and be loved by men. I want to experience true, genuine, grounded intimacy with men romantically, platonically, and professionally. I want to be in commune with them, not against them. I also want to rebuild my relationship with myself and, as such, be in communion with myself, not against myself. After having experienced disassociation and disconnection from my body for more than a decade, I'm really ready to come back into my body. I want to tell my body it doesn't have to protect me or keep me safe from memories and experiences any longer. I want to get rid of the remnants of painful experiences that have made a permanent home in my body. I deserve to have more space, more love, and more safety in my body instead. And it's important that I offer course corrections to my body by countering all the ways in which it felt compromised. So, writing about this incident, speaking about this incident in this way, is part of healing and rebuilding my relationship with men, myself, and my being, like capital B, being. It's part of fully giving to the earth and the world all that no longer serves me. Silence and secrecy is the breeding ground for shame. This is what I've learned from Brene Brown. Like, anytime there's secrets or you try to hide something, that's where shame is really created. And I don't want to have any shame. I don't want to have any reservations, guilt, confusion, disrespect, or discomfort anymore. And more than anything, I want to live a life that is free. I don't want to be bound to painful experiences of the past. I don't want to be the 14-year-old Harpo who was pinned to the wall. For a long time, it's actually the only way I saw myself. But I'm ready to really see myself for who I am, as I am, in my body, with my body, and for my body.